Hi, everyone. Welcome, welcome. We're seeing a number of folks trickling in. Just hang tight for a moment as we hit a critical mass, and then we'll go ahead and get started.
I always like this part of webinars because it's like watching a telethon. We're just watching the numbers go up.
Exactly. All right. Okay, we're expecting a number of additional folks to join us, but we're going to go ahead and get started because we have quite a bit to cover today. So first off, thank you everyone for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us. My name is Julia Kim. I'm the Climate Change Energy Program Director with CivicWell, and I'll be serving as your moderator today. Please do introduce yourself via chat. We love to get a sense of who's in the room with us, and feel free to stay active in that chat throughout the webinar. And just a little bit about CivicWell, in case folks are not familiar with us. We're a nonprofit working with communities across California and beyond. We're really just connecting local leaders to resources, policy solutions, technical assistance, and also their peer leaders to support a variety of sustainability initiatives. We're also a proud outreach partner for Empower Procurement, which will be the focus of today's webinar. So yes, today we'll be diving into Empower Procurement. We have a set of speakers who will be running through some key findings and highlighting some additional opportunities that are currently live, where you can get some additional technical assistance to support your work. The webinar will include a series of presentations, and then we'll have time at the end for a panel discussion. So we encourage folks to keep those questions coming, utilize the Q&A module at any point throughout the webinar. Feel free to drop your questions in, and we'll try to get to as many as we can as we move into the panel discussion. We're also recording this webinar, and we'll provide the webinar recording along with the presentation slides, as well as links to additional resources as part of follow-up. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our fantastic speakers with us here today. So we'll first hear from Doug Davenport, who is the founder of Prospect Silicon Valley, also called ProspectSV, which partners with both private and public sector organizations to drive the startup and scaling of innovative technology solutions in the transportation, energy, and infrastructure sectors. Doug serves as project executive over all consulting and grant activities, including the Empower Procurement program. We'll then hear from Zig Kunczynski. Zig is a senior project manager in the Policy and Ratings Department at Energy Solutions, where he works on non-residential enhancements to the energy code, and also runs the retail products platform for the Northwest Energy Efficiency Alliance. Zig also leads the e-buildings procurement initiative for the Empower Procurement program. Thanks, Zig, for being with us. We'll then hear from Ilse Villacorta. Ilse is a senior project associate at ProspectSV, focusing on the EV fleet technical assistance for public agencies and EV schools fleets. So you'll hear more from Ilse about the technical assistance program and some findings and some live opportunities to get some additional support after this webinar. And then finally, we'll hear from Billie Holecek. Billie is a researcher at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, where she supports federal and state programs to guide organizations to save energy and greenhouse gas emissions by purchasing energy efficient technologies. Over the past year, Billie has facilitated a working group focused on barriers and solutions for utilizing electronic procurement systems to increase and simplify the process of sustainable procurement. And with that, Doug, I'm going to pass it over to you to get us started.
Excellent. Good morning, everyone. Let me get my slides queued up. Julia, just want to make sure that's visible.
Looks great.
Excellent. So thank you all for being here. I'm Doug Davenport, founder and executive director of Prospect Silicon Valley. We have led a program called Empower Procurement for now close to 4 years. What I'm about to go through is the distillation of what we've learned through a tremendous amount of effort, and we hope that this will be useful. I'll just acknowledge, I believe that our commission agreement grant manager, Molly Mahoney, is in the audience, and we're very grateful to Molly and to the Energy Commission for their partnership. So just quick about Prospect Silicon Valley. Our mission here is to increase impact and applicability of beneficial technology solutions in the clean tech and civic space. So the way we go about that is a little different than most firms. We're here to expand the conversation about innovative solutions, whether that's expanding the applicability of an idea like autonomy toward transit, or if that's just increasing the accessibility of an idea or an innovation, such as the great work that's being done to electrify transportation in California, and making sure that it is broadly applicable and accessible to every community. We build peer networks, and we have a program we call peer forums that we've been excited to have so many CivicWell members take part in. It's a way to build connection between and amongst folks that are really facing the same challenges. And then third, we really spark progress through building collaborations. And we've done a number of major projects and represented many firsts in the industry for new applications. You can learn more about that on our website, ProspectSV.org, and look for a link called Our Work. So just a quick acknowledgement of the broad group that really came together in this project over the last 4 years. I'm about to present some findings that we've connected with over this time. Now, I just want to say that this is the hard work of a national laboratory, a major consulting firm, 2 nonprofits, multiple universities, and other national corporations. I'm going to distill it into 4 clear messages. And so if you're going to use platitudes, I want to make sure that they really land with you. So just keep in mind that there's a lot of complexity behind the simple conversation we're about to have. Now, Empower Procurement is really based on a fundamental truth, and that is, organizations do a lot of things, and large complex organizations like cities, school districts, others have really a really diverse purchasing base, whether that's their basic IT and equipment out to their fleets, their buildings, lots of maintenance and other kinds of activities. As it turns out, you can do an awful lot to decarbonize an operation just by making better purchasing choices. The reason we did this program is because there's a very clear disconnect between commitments being made and the resulting behavior that happens through a purchasing organization. There's lots of reasons behind that, having to do with organization, having to do with roles, having to do with policies. And we're going to be talking about that in this webinar. But we do know that purchasing and really attacking the purchasing process can be a really important way to get to goals. The program really focused on lots of aspects of procurement, from basic product and services out to looking at contract mechanisms, looking at major asset classes like buildings and fleets, and really looking to align those institutional organizations, their roles, their policies, and the ways that they access and use information. You'll hear some of that here in a minute. The goals were to improve tools, smooth out purchasing process, look at information that would be available to the right stakeholders in a purchase, and make sure that there was engagement with decision influencers. We've done that through a number of ways, and I again want to just highlight a couple of things that we'd be happy to share with you. Just acknowledging Berkeley Lab did an incredible job as a foundational study behind this, looking at 110 different organizations as to what were really barriers to emerging technology applications. I am not going to walk you through this slide, but what you'll see is that experience and understanding of maintainability, financing, reliability were a huge barrier. And we see that as an opportunity to really help bring forward information that allow people to act today instead of being concerned about what might be. We also see that organizational barriers can include just simply awareness that a solution exists, getting buy-in throughout an organization, and their gatekeepers, as we say, the people that can turn a yes into a no very quickly, and an awareness of how they could actually acquire or enter into contract for that product or service. We see this as big deals. I believe that as you hear about what we're doing with our technical assistance program at the tail end of this program, and as well what Zig was working on with us on buildings, will certainly illuminate some of those findings. So we're going to talk about 4 different things that we learned after tremendous amounts of work over the last 4 years that we're going to talk about in 4 kind of simple terms. One, complex organizations don't know what they know, especially if you're talking about assets under transition. And let's face it, that decarbonization isn't just an ideal, it's not just a goal, it is really transforming what you own and how you operate it. And we see this as a major challenge across organizations. It starts with intent, it starts with a desire to move forward and to try this, but often the information that's needed in order to actually conduct a decarbonization effort, even a single project, can be very hard to come by. We see that time and time again in our technical assistance, and we see that as one of the areas that we certainly feel could be a scalable area of improvement across, especially across the public sector. Second of all, there's often just a real lack of information that would allow you to compare products. Although there are purchasing platforms, and I'm going to leave that to Billie to talk about, there are purchasing platforms that are starting to improve that process. It can be very difficult for people to understand what they have and what is available to them. And then third, what I call what's an opportunity and what's a reaction. We're spending a lot of time with buildings decarbonization leaders in the public sector these days. And, we see a lot that, this all started because there's a boiler that's about to go bad and they don't want to buy another gas-fired boiler. That's noble. It's excellent that they're thinking in that direction. But in order to execute a full and comprehensive decarbonization effort, you really need to be able to stand back and really know what you know from a broad standpoint, so that you're not only talking about the one product or the one project, you are actually building the context for everything that needs to be done and how it can be accomplished. 2, they don't know what you know. So they as they're gathering information, we have seen time and time again that peers lack a connection to each other. A support network such as CivicWell is hard to come by in many institutions, and even within large complex institutions like community college districts, or even an organization like the University of California, multiple campuses may be really disconnected from each other from a policy standpoint or an implementation standpoint. And so they may as well be independent and not necessarily under the same organization. So we see that as a major barrier. We've seen it time and time again that really good ideas in one corner of the world are just not understood by others. And often, as we've certainly seen over the years, that the stories tend to be told after the fact, not while they're forming. And we think that it's really important for there to be connection amongst people that are all working in the same direction, to have awareness of each other and to help build both crosstalk and hopefully even taking advantage of each other's experiences and move forward. So we see that again as another major area that we think has tremendous potential for moving these things forward. Third, not working the whole chessboard. So as a matter of just we as humans, we tend to plan and do, and planning can be a very linear thing. Change of this kind is not linear whatsoever. And so it becomes natural that people kind of break things up into projects. You can do so. Think of my example from just a moment ago of the boiler that's going bad. You're going to create a project around replacing that boiler. You want to make sure that the outcome of that project is one that helps you meet a goal that you have with regards to decarbonizing your buildings. However, you're talking about that project, and every one of the organizations is going to be focusing in on that project. The strategy is harder to articulate, and the strategy is harder to manage. Funding often kind of exacerbates that problem, and we've certainly seen successful organizations that have been able to do things really at scale and do things quickly. Their ability to raise larger amounts of capital to perform the work really helped their ability to even gain momentum, gain attention, and gain partnerships in moving their program toward completion. And so being able to work the whole chessboard and talk in terms of scale and talk in terms of finance that is at that scale is incredibly important, but very hard to do. Lastly, that boiler is not the only priority. I think that all of you would probably agree that it's very difficult to prioritize as many projects as need attention, and so often the goal that you may have for that one project may at times compete with many other priorities and needs for both attention and finance. Lastly, we have definitely seen gaps in capability, but not just that, gaps in information, gaps in resources. And we on the Empower Procurement Program have really worked to address this issue. One, certainly we talked about information, data and intelligence. We have spent lots of time with both fleet and with buildings clients talking about what data they have and how they need to look at their assets if they're thinking of decarbonizing. It is a different frame of mind. It is a different way of looking at things. And the data structure and the intelligence you have to put behind it is incredibly important. Second, contract specifications on our website, empowerprocurement.org. We have a smattering of procurement language that is downloadable and usable by your organization. We're going to continue to build that and make that available ex post. Certainly KPIs and benchmarks. And again, with a different frame of mind, we see that change is kind of hard to build kind of KPIs around, but we see that it's really important to have that. And then last, having a funding strategy. We're providing as a team lots of insight on funding availability, but for folks to build a funding strategy behind their program can be very, very challenging. So I've just given you the end result of about 4 years of an army of people working on this problem. And I'm going to be turning it over to Zig to talk specifically about building decarbonization.
Thank you, Doug. My name is Zig Kunczynski. I'm with Energy Solutions. Been working with Doug for almost 2 years now about e-buildings. And on this website, there are case studies that have been uploaded. And I wanted to walk you through some of the case studies that we did with some of the key takeaways. So Doug, next slide, please. Great. So we did 2 case studies on just very simple gas water heater replacements. And we found that this is really a good place to start. That Doug was talking about how it's one thing to make commitments and then it's another thing to turn those into purchasing actions. It's actually very helpful to start with something very straightforward. And it turns out that there are programs, especially in PG&E territory, where the utilities are both gas and electric, where today you can get, for your municipal projects, you can get gas water heaters at no charge. So the city of Piedmont and the city of Burlingame each got 6 gas water heaters, and it was nothing out of pocket for them. And that was through Willdan's program that they administered for PG&E. Also, East Bay Community Energy played a big role for Piedmont. So the first learning here is that there is a lot of help out there, and it's great to start small and start electrifying. What this sort of project really hammers home is that you want to replace before end of life. Any equipment that you install now that is not electric is going to burn gas an awful long time. And so every opportunity to replace something is really precious. Replace it with something electric now. Another learning point is consider electrification and efficiency together. There were cases where Willdan came in and looked at a water heater and helped the site reevaluate. Is this really the size that you need? Maybe it was an 80-gallon water heater, and it turned out that 50 gallons electric would be plenty for their load. So it's important to be smart. And small projects can lead to larger projects. For the city of Piedmont, for example, Doug was talking about how sometimes we don't know what we don't know, and different parts of the organization haven't had a chance to work together yet, or do electrification projects together yet. Projects that are smaller can help people come together. And so what happened in Piedmont is that after the gas water heater exchange effort, they realized that, hey, when we build our new aquatic facility, which is gonna be much bigger, let's make that electric too. So that's a very helpful thing. Doug, next slide, please. Another case study that we did is on a completely different scale. This was for the Contra Costa County Community College school district. Had new buildings that they had raised bond money for, and it's a big project. This was at least 8 years in the planning and executing, and this is much larger, much bolder than just replacing water heaters, but they are connected. So running through some of the learning points here, when you raise bond money, it's very rare. It happens maybe every 20, 30 years, and it's a real opportunity. But and this team for Contra Costa County did a great job of, hey, this money is, we want to spend it with the future in mind. We want to plan for the future. They were not actually required to do anything all electric, but they made that a requirement for their project. They were very committed to low carbon goals from the start, and that was key. Over 8 years, they were the North Star for the whole project to make sure that it stayed all electric. One interesting, and I would encourage anybody to go through and read these case studies. I can't do them justice in just a few minutes, but one part of this narrative is how much the operations and maintenance team. I wrote O&E. I meant O&M. The O&M team really had a lot of work to do to understand what it would mean to have an all-electric central utility plant, and how they were going to be the ones making it work every day. So they needed some time and so that they could support the project. And as you'll read in this case study, the commissioning and warranty processes did have some challenges. So there's a lot of lessons learned here, but the commissioning team changed during the project because it was realized that the equipment was going to be much more complicated, and there were warranty challenges. For example, the central utility plant needed to be used for existing buildings before the new buildings were online. And so that meant that it started to operate. It didn't operate at full load though, and there were some warranty conversations about that. So I would encourage you to look through these case studies and use them as discussion vehicles. And those are the 2 slides that I have, Doug. And thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thanks, Zig. And Ilse, we'll turn it over to you next.
Thank you all for joining. Thank you for being here. Let me share my screen. Perfect. So I'm Ilse Villacorta, and I'm with ProspectSV. And so for the last,
if you want to swap your the screen that you're showing, we're seeing perfect. There we go.
Perfect. Thank you. Apologies about that. Thanks. So just from the top, so I'm Ilse Villacorta, and I'm with ProspectSV, and I'm a senior project associate. And for the last 8 months or so, I've been working on technical assistance for e-fleets, but we've also recently begun some work with buildings. So this general structure will work a little bit for both of them. And so we wanted to work with organizations over the past 4 years. We've done some research, we've done some outreach. And so we wanted to kind of put some of that into action, as well as see if there was other gaps or other procurement issues we were missing. And so we started working with a couple of public agencies on technical assistance. And mainly we targeted our outreach efforts towards public agencies, cities, counties, school districts that were sort of in the beginning aspects of what would decarbonizing their fleet look like. Where were they in baselining, things like that. And so one of our first participants was the city of Watsonville. And they were actually really interested in doing a thorough assessment and seeing baselining their fleet, figuring out what was the market for medium duty, heavy duty, what was the market for light fleet. And so kind of on working with them, this kind of came out as our model. So task 1 is assessment, task 2 is initial recommendations and review. And this is a bit of an iterative process, so that's why it says initial. And then the task 4 is final recommendations, as well as sharing at the end. And so in assessment, we really went in and we asked for a fleet list, and this is working with buildings as well. We were asking for a building portfolio. And so we're assessing it. We're doing a little bit of analysis. We're playing around with Excel, which I know a lot of people love. And we're trying to figure out, yes, the fleet is 500, 600 vehicles, but prioritizing for the next 2 to 3 years, where are those vehicles? Which vehicles, either from their odometer, from their age, from their jobs, which ones are really close to having to be replaced? And so we, have to dig through a lot of an array of information in an array of ways. Public agencies, are understaffed, as Doug pointed out. And so getting all of that data can be a little difficult. Sometimes it's not centralized, sometimes it's with different departments. Sometimes it's in this weird formats that then you have to kind of convert. So there's a lot of time that goes into the assessment, talking to different departments. And so that takes up a huge chunk of our work on technical assistance. And then kind of once we have sort of disassembled all of the fleet characteristics and all of the vehicles, we pick a couple that are representative of the fleet. The city of Watsonville had a lot of trucks, and so we chose that as one of our vehicles. We chose a sedan as another. And so we conduct a TCO analysis of showing you, hey, long-term, electric vehicles can be a bit of a bigger purchase price, but over the lifespan, you'll have cost savings, both from fuel and maintenance, those being the big 2 ones. And so we do all that, we present them. It's a bit of, there's assumptions in sort of this total cost of ownership. So we do like to go back with our partner agencies and ask, hey, we assumed a $4.50 price for gas. And sometimes that's correct. And sometimes, there's been a couple of agencies that already have gas contracts that give them a cheaper gas. Or there are some who are like, geographically speaking, we actually pay more than that. So I always like to come back and make sure that those assumptions are in line with what they're seeing. Even if they're estimates, we always want to make sure that it's as useful to the agency as it can be. And so kind of once we do this back and forth and we're like, yes, that looks right, we move on. And so we gather some other infrastructure information. Some of the agencies have sort of looked at it. And so they have maybe a very simple report, or internally working with their maintenance and operations crew, they've done a couple of surveys to see what sites would be the best. And so we kind of hoover up as much of that information as we can before we move on to test 2. And so this is where some of that back and forth comes in, review of draft TCO. And then we also help identify, based on sort of what we found in our total cost of ownership analysis, as well as the vehicles that we think would be the best replacement for the current internal combustion engines, we try to identify the other EVSE needs. So charging, as well as software, charge management considerations. Obviously, we are not an engineering firm, so we are a little bit boxed in what we can provide, and we make that very obvious. But again, these are agencies that are sort of just starting to get their heads around what would that actually mean. But we do help them be like, based on the vehicles, these would be the best chargers. Obviously, specific chargers would be up to them and whomever they may contract with. But we do try to demystify and educate the maintenance people, the sustainability people, kind of on what's out there in the market and kind of what we see would be the best fit for where they're going and what their needs are. And then we move on to task 3. So, we kind of do the iterative approach. We come back. And then once we've sort of finalized some of that information, we provide next steps as to, hey, you are thinking of, many of them are already thinking about pilots. So there is usually an action headed in that direction. So taking that in mind, we provide some next steps based on what they're telling us they're already planning to do, what we think would be considerations. And that's, I think, something that's been really important as we've done this technical assistance with a lot of our public agencies, is that because of where EVs are, both technology and software-wise, making a long-term 25 master plan is sometimes not the best. It's great for long-term goals, but for specifics, having a super detailed master plan is sometimes not the best. So what we've sort of been talking with our agencies is having sort of those short, medium, and long-term strategies, and knowing that things might change, technologies might shift, software will become a little bit better, and so you might have more data, and knowing potentially what that more data could provide for you and usefulness. And so we do give them considerations. We give them sort of short-term strategies for the next 5 to 10 years, and then we also work on considerations long-term. When you hit that 15-year mark, you should look at your capital investments. You should make sure that those chargers are up to par. Did your contract match your chargers? Were there gaps in that first round that you want to plug and fine tune and enhance? And so the iterative process we sort of show in our TA is something that we expound on our agencies to also take internally, is that the whole transition will be a little iterative, and there will be small pivots and there will be adjustments that you'll make. But that allows nimbleness and flexibility and allows the city to always try to act in the most financially judicious way, as well as making sure that these vehicles can actually keep up with the jobs they're doing. That's another takeaway that we found, is the medium duty and heavy duty market is just not quite there yet. It is in some ways. And obviously the medium duty and heavy duty is hugely customizable and very job specific. But that market is just a little bit behind. So we're hoping in the next couple of years, we'll see some great improvements and some more vehicles in those spaces come out that are better fits for the jobs that we're trying to replace those internal combustion engines with. And then of course, we've had some of, maybe some of the CivicWell members have been to some of the peer forums. We have had the city of Watsonville present on this. We've had a couple of other cities that we've worked with. We've also worked with school districts and counties, and obviously those are a little bit different. School buses are really big now, and there's a lot of funding, but there's also more limited resources in terms of baselining and figuring out maintenance and operations and fuels, which isn't a bad thing, but it has been a learning experience both for the districts and ourselves, and making sure we can give them the best information we can. Counties, of course, are a little bit bigger geographically, and so it's been interesting to be working with counties on trying to figure out how to best maximize charging infrastructure. Some of these counties can be ginormous, some are quite small, so it is a little bit of it's a little over the map, but we are hoping that we are able to offer a little bit more of this technical assistance to other interested parties, perhaps not on as a one-on-one as we have been doing with fleets, but more on a sort of webinar, how do you baseline your own? So we're working and we're trying to kind of get it out to more people, as well as sort of creating toolkits to help public agencies take that on themselves as best they can, understanding that they're overtaxed.
Great. Thanks so much, Ilse. I know that there are a number of folks who are joining us today who have been receiving technical assistance. And if there are others, if any of this intrigues you, please do reach out to the ProspectSV team. And with that, Billie, we'll turn it over to you. Billie, you might be, oh, there you are.
Sorry about that, I was muted. All right, Good morning, everyone, and thank you all for joining us again today. My name is Billie Holecek, and I am a researcher at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory. And today I'm going to share with you just a small part of the work that we've been doing here to increase the procurement of energy efficient products. Through the Empower Procurement program and with funding from the California Energy Commission, we have been able to help organizations write sustainable procurement policies. We've been able to share some templated contract language to make the procurement of energy efficient products a bit less burdensome. And we also had a great opportunity in which we hosted a year-long working group focused on one tool that can help make sustainable procurement the default, and that is e-procurement or electronic procurement systems. So electronic procurement systems are the systems that allow you all to do the requisitioning, ordering, and purchasing of different goods and services online. And these systems allow for organizations to go all the way from managing suppliers to purchasing the item, receiving a final report, and the final invoice. We focused on this tool because we heard from multiple entities throughout the state of California that even if they had a sustainable procurement policy in place, it was often not followed, and they also really had no way to track whether or not the policy was being followed. And one of the colleges that we provided technical assistance to asked if we had any advice to help them purchase a new electronic procurement system that could help make their sustainable procurement a bit easier. When we started looking into this, we realized that a lot of conversations were being had regarding e-procurement systems, but oftentimes that information wasn't being really shared across the different stakeholder groups that needed to be involved, or even within different offices of the same organization. That's kind of they don't know what they know. With that in mind, we created a working group where we aimed to help understand the challenges that needed to be overcome to make the acquisition of sustainable products the default. We knew there was a lot that needed to be done, and there's a lot that still needs to be done, but we couldn't tackle each challenge. So instead, we focused on two specific areas: e-catalogs or punch-out catalogs, which are the systems that you use to purchase the item, and then analytics and reporting to help entities begin tracking whether or not their policies were actually being followed. Our big goal as a working group was to figure out how to have electronic procurement systems that would really allow for the successful acquisition of sustainable products by default. And this is because we know that often those who make purchases have their success measured based on how quickly they're able to make each purchase. But when we as sustainability people come in and we ask them to choose an item that we prefer, being the more sustainable or the more energy efficient item, it can slow down that process and reflect on them. So we kind of know that we need to figure out a way to get to the desired outcome as quickly and as easily as possible. In that context, this tool really matters and currently doesn't support the objectives that we as a group have created. Within the categories of e-catalogs and reporting, we focused on understanding the challenges related to how e-procurement systems can be used to identify sustainable products, verify the item's sustainability, and report on the purchases that have been made to meet different procurement requirements that may exist within organizations. And we know these are pain points because in our working group, we heard that from our members, and we also saw it in our personal experiences in purchasing. So one example is when it comes to identifying a product, it can be hard to trust the label that on that product is accurate. And on the screen here, you can see two awesome examples where a product's labeled, but that label is inaccurate. One was for a toner cartridge labeled Energy Star and energy efficient, but a toner cartridge doesn't consume energy and therefore does not really qualify for an Energy Star label, nor can it be energy efficient. And the other for pre-printed tab dividers with a post-consumer recycled content of 20%, but a total recycled content of 0%. Again, that's inaccurate. So these are just two quick examples where we can see the e-procurement systems that are supposed to make purchasing easier for us are starting to fail us. With this, we worked collaboratively within our working group and with our working group members, which you can see some examples of on the right of the screen. So we had a whole host of different stakeholders to really understand these challenges even further. We used a collaborative platform to ensure the voice of each and every stakeholder was represented, and so that we could really understand step by step the challenges that may pop up as we begin to ask for systems to support our sustainable procurement goals by default. That activity really helped us to define challenges into 4 different categories to help create a cohesive ask at the end of the working group. I'm not going to dive into that today, but if you're interested in learning more, we have a webinar that you can watch that gets a bit more in depth on these challenges and ways we think you can overcome them. That activity also helped us to identify that there are at least 5 different stakeholder types that all play a role in getting sustainable acquisition to work properly. And this was really an aha moment for us as a group. When we started exploring e-procurement systems, we originally thought that the ask could be relatively easy, and we thought we could talk to the buyer to understand what requirements are in place and share those with the electronic procurement system providers to show those requirements in the system. But we began to realize that we can't just talk to the contracting officers. We need to understand what everyone else is doing to see success here, and all the actors must interact with each other so we can start to understand what everyone knows and the steps we all need to take. So to run through a quick example, say there's a contracting officer who has a requirement to purchase an Energy Star product. They go to their e-catalog system, which happens to be hosted through Amazon, and they're not able to find that Energy Star product. That may be because the product manufacturer, for example, Apple, hasn't provided them with those environmental attributes to post on their website. So in order for the contracting officer to identify a product, the vendor must communicate with the product manufacturer that that's a piece of information they need to post it on their website. Then we have the issue of those labels maybe being inaccurate. And that's where we have the environmental certifiers such as Energy Star come in to match the label that might be on the Amazon website with the certification that they have in their system. And once we have all of that, we can go to the electronic procurement system providers and ask them for the things we want, like sorting items by their environmental attributes, sorting items to the top that might allow us to meet our organization's goals. And again, make sustainable procurement the default. So that was a really quick version of how we got to where we are. Through the working group, we learned that we were all asking for very similar things or wanting very similar things, but we used very different language while we were asking for it. To help with this, we developed some communication guidance that can help you all communicate your needs to different stakeholders that need to be talked with to improve sustainable procurement through the use of e-procurement systems. The resource we developed is a starting point to be used to communicate the different asks you may want, like the ability to tag products in your e-procurement systems or the ability to search for products that meet your organization's requirements. But when we all start asking for the same thing, it can really help to express a market need for the specified features we desire and make sustainable procurement the default in the systems and not something we all have to individually ask for. You all have the opportunity to take this to the next step by using these resources, even if you don't know where to start, and even if the topic of e-procurement as a sustainable procurement tool is today's the first time you heard it, you can use this to help you understand what features might be available for you and what you might want to ask for the next time you purchase an e-procurement system or update the system you currently have. I just have a couple resources to end with. The first is our capstone presentation, which talks about e-procurement systems and the findings from our working group, way more in depth than I was able to get in today, and also has a bunch of examples from our different working group members and different tools that might be available to you. Also have the communication guidance that Doug talked about that's available on the website, as well as some contracting language that you can copy and paste into product or service solicitations. And if you're interested in updating your sustainable procurement policy or you don't have one, we also have a conference paper posted on the Empower Procurement website that can guide you in creating a successful sustainable procurement policy. And last but not least, if you're interested in learning more about what we do at the lab to support energy efficient product procurement, I invite you all to take a look at our website. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Billie. Thank you to all of our speakers. If we were gathered in person, I imagine we would hear a loud round of applause, but we are here virtually. I'd like to invite all of our presenters back for a panel discussion. We have a number of questions to get to. We invite all participants, drop your questions in the Q&A module, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. One I'm seeing, many jurisdictions are being approached by a variety of vendors, and particularly new vendors. what are some key questions that staff should be considering to properly vet potential vendors, especially as we're seeing, I imagine, a lot of new startups coming online?
If you wouldn't mind, I'd like to maybe kick that off. And this is no disrespect to any of our colleagues in any of these industries. But if y'all think that you're just getting started and just understanding how to do an electric fleet or how to look at decarbonization, I always get that word wrong, decarbonized buildings, you need to know that everybody else is in the same place. So no matter what is being claimed, just because somebody has done it once doesn't mean that they know more than you, right? We, Prospect Silicon Valley, we've now worked with 25 separate agencies on these plans, and we're just starting to scratch the surface. Everybody is scratching the surface. So, you know, I would say it's not about the, I would go back behind that and say, you need to become a savvy customer. I think part of it is knowing what your data tells you, knowing what you know about your fleet, knowing what you know about your organizational goals, knowing what you know about your expectations. And then, you know, working with an organization like ours or like CivicWell or other folks that are there on your side, make sure that you can kind of articulate your expectations clearly. Finding contracting language that gets you a response, I think is more important than, let's say, trying to separate the wheat from the chaff, because everybody's still learning. That's my opinion. And, you know, again, no disrespect to any of these organizations. Everybody wants to do the right thing, but just don't assume that you are the least educated person in the room.
I think so. Sig.
Yeah, and I would, from what we saw, there is an opportunity to learn from others who have already done that. So, in our case, the city of Burlingame was the first to use the program through PG&E to replace their gas water heaters. So when Piedmont became aware of it, it made it easier for them. And so there really is and the folks who implement the utility programs, they do this again and again, and they have a wealth of information. So they've really given their customers some very good experiences.
Okay, I'm going to move on to our next question. Have you seen any success with joint procurement initiatives as a way to achieve savings across jurisdictions? I don't know if this has come up through technical assistance or if you've seen any examples of joint procurement around EV fleets or charging infrastructure or other products. Anything there?
I'd ask Billie, not to put you on the spot, but was anything from the e-procurement working group covering kind of joint procurement initiatives?
Not at this point, but it's definitely something we'd love to explore in the future.
Okay, we are aware that there's a number of, and Zig, your predecessor in the program, Renee, certainly saw this. There's a lot of purchasing cooperatives, right? So those purchasing cooperatives tend to work in regions, and they tend to really try to drive lowest cost, best value. That is not the same as lowest carbon footprint, highest sustainability, or toward a new complex goal like decarbonization, right? So we know that those folks existed. We have seen in the past, for example, in Silicon Valley, there was a large multi-agency solar purchase. To my knowledge, we are not seeing that in buildings or in fleets at this time. I mean, nothing that I have heard of for years. My colleagues, anything there?
I wouldn't say there's joint procurement, but I know if you're a public agency in California, there are procurement agreements you can jump on that give you a higher cost savings than if you were just acting as an individual agency through CivicWell and through the governors. I will pop in the link, but there are other ways you can get those cost savings. without necessarily entering a joint procurement agreement. And Sourcewell is the best one I found. It's a little clunky to navigate, but I have heard from other agencies that they have been able to get a better MSRP using those contracts than they would otherwise.
We have another question. Are there EV policy language examples available? I'm not sure if that's something that was collected as I know there are a number of resources that were gathered for Empower Procurement.
We will have to follow up. I don't have perfect knowledge of what's in that bag.
Now, I'll say, folks, we're going to share contact info at the end of this webinar, and we'll follow up, of course, via email. And if there are other questions that come up, please lean on us. Please reach out, and we'll do some digging and try to get the answers for you. Another question here, and the answer might be to reach out to us for technical assistance. What are some simple steps that a capacity-constrained agency can take towards sustainable procurement? And again, the simple first step might be reaching out to us to get some of that technical assistance that Ilse covered.
Yeah, I'd also
maybe go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to point to the contracting language on the Empower Procurement website again. This is copy and paste language. You can take it exactly as it is or change it for your organization's needs that focuses specifically on energy efficient product procurement, so it can help lighten that load.
I was going to say, you know, we are a capacity constrained organization, and I'm talking about us collectively here under this program, and we're at the tail end of a program. We're very proud of what we've done, but we do intend some leave behind. So some advice I would be, is number one, look forward in the next couple of months to seeing some guidance on how do you think about fleet data. Look forward to some guidance and some case studies from our friends at Energy Solutions on the early kind of decarb efforts of a number of your peer cities. And you will see additional resources that are coming on in this regard. And we hope to do some additional webinars to kind of teach some of these things. And certainly we're not going away, so we want everybody to contact us. I think certainly thinking about your information and knowing how to look at it and knowing how to prioritize for yourself is far more important than hiring a consultant to tell you what you can very easily know at this point.
I think we have time for just a couple more. I think that final question, I'm going to ask each of our speakers to share just one key takeaway or one aha moment, just one thing that you want folks who are gathered here today to take away from this webinar. So keep that in the back of your mind. Another question that might be slightly outside of the scope of this project, but I'm going to flag it for our speakers anyway. So many cities are struggling to support residents in electrifying their homes, as well as to support the local businesses. Do you have any suggestions for how cities can support broader community electrification?
It is a little outside of the scope, but what I would say, especially if you're in a region where you have a CCA, the community choice aggregators, they have been very helpful in wanting to turn those residential solar. I have found they have been the most receptive in terms of liaising and connecting you with resources, especially region specific. There's a lot of grants and things like that that are region specific. Your CCA would be the best one. A level up would be the IOUs. PG&E is also really trying to decarbonize residential as much as they can. So I think connecting to those resources, because they'll be the ones who really have the knowledge based on like how to actually make your constituents do that. They might have the best.
Great. And yeah, this is something that we know many cities are struggling with. So we're trying to provide as much support as we can. So again, let's stay in touch. Happy to provide additional resources after this webinar. Yeah, and let's do a final round of just quick key takeaways, which I know like this webinar was of course focused on sharing takeaways. But again, if there's just one thing you'd like our participants to walk away with from this webinar, I would love to hear that. Let's go in reverse presentation order. So we'll go Billie, then Ilse, then Zig, and then over to you, Doug.
Yeah, I just will say talk to each other. We started this research out going our normal research routes looking for papers, but it's a pretty new topic in using e-procurement systems for sustainable procurement. And once we started talking to other organizations, we realized they had answers to a lot of the questions that we couldn't find answers to. So just make sure you're talking to people in your area as things like this come up.
I would say, I think one of the biggest takeaways I've had from this is don't panic. It is happening tomorrow. You do have time. I've seen so many fleet managers flustered and, just seeing their whole fleet sizes and thinking it has to happen by tomorrow. You have time and you can take it steps by steps, bits by bits. So don't feel overwhelmed. And also there's a lot of agencies that are also in that boat. A little bit of writing Billie's agree, talk with each other, especially if there's a city or a public agency that is kind of similar to you, especially if you're running into issues. Definitely meet up with them. They may have either a connection or potentially a resource, if not an outright answer.
So from our perspective, I would say, because we did case studies, so we took a lot of time talking to people who are actually in the trenches, and we found in all cases that individuals mattered. And in contrast, we did find, before we wrote any case studies, we were doing some research, and we found out about one organization that had the opportunity to install free equipment, really zero out of cost, high quality equipment. They were not able to make it happen. They weren't able to just do the project. They weren't able to overcome some of the internal barriers that they had. So these barriers are real, but individuals are able to make a big difference when they talk to each other, when they get support from other agencies that have kind of already done it. Then becomes harder and harder to say no.
And so thanks, Julia, for having everybody else give all the great takeaways and making it harder and harder for me to find a new one. But I will say this, that this is a multilingual argument. And what I mean, I go back to something that was taught to me a long time ago: ethos, pathos, logos, right? Okay, so we're doing this because it's good for the environment, it's good for each other, it's good for our air, it's good for our clean energy future, and that's very important. And there's a responsibility in doing that. But as you're talking about these, that isn't enough to convince a CFO to make a principled financial decision around public funds. You have to have a logical argument and a very clear reasoning and strategy behind this. Like it or not, this isn't just about the kids. This has to be about strong fiscal discipline. Third, you need to have a sensitivity to the fact that multiple organizations are going to be disturbed by this work. It's a good thing to do, but you have to do it with absolute sensitivity to the fact that they have a job that is already challenging. And their core responsibilities, think about a fleet manager. A core responsibility of a fleet manager is not to now manage energy, logistics, redesign of a facility, redesign of parking, all of these various things. You have to realize that what you are doing is fundamentally really upsetting a lot of what's the word, apple carts, and know that that's okay, but you have to bring that this is, ethically important. This is a logical decision, and that we're going to do this in a way that doesn't destroy, but rather.
Great. Thanks, Doug. Thanks, everyone. We are at time. So just flashing this page, huge thank you to everyone for joining us. Special thanks, of course, to Doug, Zig, Ilse, and Billie for making the time to present, share some findings from the Empower Procurement program. Stay tuned, everyone. We'll share resources from this webinar, as well as a number of those resources that were mentioned throughout today's presentations as part of webinar follow-up. And stay tuned. As this program wraps up, we'll have even more findings and resources to share. And as always, please reach out if you have any questions and if you're interested in receiving technical assistance. You see the contact info up on your screen. All of our speakers are standing by, eager to hear from you. So please don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.